Hello, everybody, wherever you are watching us from. It's nice to be with you. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. Welcome to the forum talk of the ninth edition of the World Forum for Democracy. My name is Alex Taylor. I'm based in Paris. I'm delighted to be your host for this online event. This forum talk is part of the campaign 12 months. One question, 12 months altogether of exchanges and events aiming to answer the question posed by the ninth edition of the forum: can democracy save the environment? Each month is devoted, as you may know, to a particular topic, and February is devoted to climate change-driven disasters and displacement. Obviously, we've all been seeing the spectacular pictures in the news about what's happening in Texas, for example, and even here in Paris, for example. Last week it was -10, and this weekend it's going to be 17. So it's time we have to do something. This month we are collaborating with Council of Europe's Europa Major Hazards Agreement, which is a platform for cooperation in the field of major natural and technological disasters. Its field of competence covers disaster risk reduction, in particular knowledge, prevention, preparedness, risk management, and post-crisis analysis. As speakers today are part of their network. Just to remind you, before we start, the World Forum for Democracy is a Council of Europe initiative organised with the support and partnership of France, the Grand Est region, the Bas-Rhin department, and the city of Strasbourg. It's a unique platform for political decision makers, civil society, academics, journalists as well, the private sector, and citizen activists. I'm sure we have quite a few watching, to debate solutions to key challenges for democracy worldwide. Just to remind you, the Council of Europe is a pan-European intergovernmental organisation headquartered in Strasbourg, with 47 member states dedicated to democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. So today, we will spend an hour together with our speakers, who will no doubt give us a lot of food for thought. And after the presentation, hopefully, before we wrap up, a little discussion with the speakers. I will present them each as they are going to speak, but you can see them on the screen. We're delighted to have with us Mr. Dimitris Christou, Johan Goltamer, Anton Mikalev, and I think, yes, we have been joined by Ferruccio Ferrini. I will present you a little bit more just when it comes to your turn to do your presentations. Just a quick word to say, as you can see, we're all men. We did actually try very hard to address the gender imbalance of this forum talk. We've reached out to lots of female experts, however, none was available. We are doing a forum talk on Tuesday, which you will see, which will be much more gender balanced. So I'm going to start with Anton Mikalev from Euro-Mediterranean Center on Insular Coastal Dynamics in Malta, who just informed us you will be talking in Maltese, so everybody will panic. Hello, welcome. You are an associate professor at the University of Malta at the Institute of Earth Systems on the Mediterranean coastal and marine environment, coastal hazards, coastal risk management, and ocean systems. Your area of specialization, Anton, is coastal geomorphology and integrated coastal area management, particularly that related to beach management. And since 1989, you have served as the director of the Euro-Mediterranean Center on Insular Coastal Dynamics. What better person to start us off? You're going to tell us about climate change impacts on coastal dynamics with specific reference to natural coastal hazards. And after 12 minutes, Anton, I will cut you off. So please tell us. Welcome. We have to hear you. I'm not sure your microphone. Yes, perfect.
Yes.
Yes, perfect. We heard you.
Right. Can you see my screen then?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Very good. Well, I will be talking in English. Just by the way, we have two official languages in Malta, the English and Maltese, but the Maltese is the national language. Anyway, I'll start the ball rolling with my presentation on climate change impacts on coastal dynamics, with specific reference to coastal hazards. Now, it's quite interesting to point out at the beginning that when I talk about coastal dynamics, these are driven by natural processes. So as you can see there on the screen, there's the wind and waves, there's inshore currents, tides, changes in sea level, and erosion itself. These are all natural processes. And climate change as well comes with a natural component. And so the challenge very often for people like us is to tease out those anthropogenic influences on these otherwise natural phenomena. And I will be focusing on coastal hazards for two main reasons. The first is because of the popularity of the coast. Since 1980, the coastal populations have increased by about 46%. And in general, the population density on the coast is about twice that of the national average. So it's a very highly populated area, and therefore any hazard that takes place at the coast is obviously magnified because of the increased exposure and vulnerability of populations there. And the second reason that I'll focus on coastal hazards is because of the importance of the oceans themselves. So far, the ocean has absorbed approximately 93% of the heat generated by global warming. And this, of course, reduces or slows down the warming of the atmosphere, but it does bring about a number of negative effects for the planet. So warming oceans are obviously associated with sea level rise, because as the oceans warm up, they expand, and so the sea level goes up. Warming oceans are also associated with threats to the marine ecosystems. For example, I show there on the screen the bleaching of corals, and they also threaten human livelihoods, such as, fisheries, tourism. Warming oceans have also been associated with the thinning of ice shelves. We've seen recently in India the huge ice shelf there issue, and sea ice. But last but not least, all this heat that's been absorbed and trapped in the oceans will eventually be released. And when that happens, that will commit the Earth, the planet, to a much greater warming than we have today. Now, in my title, there's also reference to natural coastal hazards. And here it should be quite interesting because these are extreme events of the natural processes that I mentioned earlier that influence coastal dynamics. So you'll see here on the left of the screen the picture of a storm surge driven by strong storm winds. You have coastal landslides and rockfalls, flooding events, severe coastal erosion at the bottom, and sea level rise. And all of these are influenced by climate change. And there are two other hazards which I include with coastal hazards, that's tsunamis and earthquakes, but I won't be talking about those two today because so far there's been no link made between climate change and tsunamis and earthquakes. So if we look at the influence of climate change on waves and sea storms, in general, waves tend to generate coastal erosion. But in particular, sea storms, or storm waves, if you like, generate wave scour, they generate flooding, and they destroy very, very important seagrass meadows at the coast. And these actions, these negative actions of waves and storm waves especially, are enhanced by tides and climate change-induced sea level rise and increased storminess, because these latter two, the tides and the climate change-induced sea level rise and storminess, tend to deepen the waters at the shoreline, therefore allowing larger waves to act in this zone. Then a 2019 study, I refer to two studies here very quickly. 2019 study indicated or concluded that there's been since 1984, as a direct result of anthropogenic global warming, an increase of wave power. So things are getting worse. And a more recent study earlier this year in 2021 in January identified that over the last 41 years in a large part of the Western Mediterranean basin, storm power has increased steadily. Now, if we look at the issue of erosion or beach erosion a bit more particular, because that's where I work in mostly, climate change has been, of course, associated with the melting of sea ice. And this sea ice would, not just sea ice actually, sea ice and ice on the littoral. This would normally protect the shoreline and beaches from wave impact. But if these things are melting, then the impact is greater, obviously. And with a sea level rise tends to gradually inundate low-lying sandy beaches. And this is especially true, as can be seen from the images there I present, where construction has taken place at the back of the beach. And what this does, this generates what we refer to as coastal squeeze, where the beach is not allowed to naturally migrate landward, but it's trapped between the construction and the rising sea level, and therefore becomes less wide. And lastly, there's the issue of reduced sediment supplies. I mean, this has been prevalent now for many decades, but climate change itself will influence this over the next century or so by its influence on changing ocean chemistry, pardon me, and also by the influence of climate change on changing trends of precipitation. Obviously, with rainfall, there's normally water runoff off the land carrying sediments either into a river system or directly into the coastal areas, bringing sediment, much needed sediment, to these sediment systems on the coast. Well, with sea level rise itself, sea levels are very, very important in determining the degree of influence of flooding, of coastal erosion, and of storm surges. Now, as I mentioned earlier, warming oceans will expand and therefore raise the sea level, but warming climates also tend to melt more land-based ice, which puts more fresh water into the coastal system and therefore raising sea level. There was a 2007 study on a northern Mediterranean coast, I think it was in the Provence area, that attributed 50% of the shoreline retreat quantified in that area directly to sea level rise. All in all, there's been about 24 centimeters of sea level rise since 1880, and the trend of sea level rise is unfortunately an accelerating one, which means I think it's almost doubled over the 20th century. And as a result, more coastal cities are suffering from high tide floods. There was a case study in the US, and it identified that many coastal cities in the US are now suffering high tide flooding up to 300 to 900% more frequently than they did 50 years ago. In 2018, the top layer of the ocean, approximately 2,000 meters, was warmer than at any other time before. And just before 2018, the 3 decades leading up to 2018 exhibited an ocean warming up to 40% faster than in the mid of the previous century. With sea level rise itself, there was a 2019 study, a very important study, that concluded that we have highly underestimated the global vulnerability to sea level rise. They predicted that in about 30 years' time, land which is home to about 300 million people today will suffer from chronic flooding. And by 2100, land which is home to about 200 million people today will be below water at high tides. This means that there'll be flooding without any storms necessary. And these are consequences within the lifetimes of people alive today. And finally, the climate change influence on hurricanes and storm surges. Well, this is quite simple. The warmer the oceans get, or warmer oceans in a sense, fuel stronger storms. And 2017 Atlantic hurricane season threw records right out of the window. Hurricane Harvey, for example, had dumped more rain on the United States than any previous hurricane before. Hurricane Irma exhibited the longest period with a Category 5 classification for a hurricane. And September of 2017 recorded the highest monthly cyclonic energy ever. And 3 of the 5 costliest storms in the US history took place in 2017. This means that these storms were larger in their destruction than the much publicized Hurricane Katrina that hit New Orleans in 2005. And the conclusion of this study, and I'll end my presentation with this, was that many coastal cities in the world will suffer or will find themselves in the same shoes of these hurricane impacts, not only in the next decades, but for centuries to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anton. Just I was listening to you, obviously, very interesting presentation. Just out of curiosity, is it something that affects you particularly in Malta? Is this what explains your interest? Is Malta affected?
It's quite interesting. Well, with hurricanes were not something typical to the Mediterranean, but now they're becoming more frequent. In fact, they had to come up with a name for Mediterranean hurricanes. They're called medicanes, and it's simply because the Mediterranean is now warming up sufficiently to be able to sustain hurricane type of hazards. So yes, things are growing here. Sea level rise is a bit different because sea level rise is different in different parts of the world, and the Mediterranean is as yet, pardon me, not exhibiting very high sea levels. But for other storms like winter storms, beach erosion, our beaches are paramount for our island economy, if you like. So these are really serious issues for us as well. Yes.
Yes, I imagine so. That's why I asked the question to see what was your personal engagement in this. Thank you very much. We'll come back to you for some discussion, hopefully afterwards. Now, delighted to turn to Johann Goldammer. Guten Tag, Johann. Herzlich willkommen. If you could turn your microphone on. Great. You're Director of Global Fire Monitoring Center in Germany. You're a professional forester and forest scientist. You're specialized in fire ecology and fire management at the Max Planck Institute for Chemistry, and you're professor for fire ecology. It sounds very exciting, at Freiburg University. In 1998, you established the Global Fire Monitoring Center, and you're serving as its director. You have been ever since then. I think you're going to tell us about climate change and its serious impacts on increased risk and the extent of wildfires. So please, 12 minutes if you could, over to you.
Thank you very much for introducing, and warm greetings to everyone from Freiburg. After Anton's presentation on water, I'm now switching to fire, and let me try to enter now the PowerPoint presentation. I hope it will work.
Perfect.
Could you confirm that you see the screen?
Yes, absolutely. Your climate change and its serious impacts on increased risks and extent of wildfires. We can see it. Great.
Yes, and I took the liberty and added a subtitle, Why Democracy Should Play an Increasing Role in Wildfire Disaster Risk Reduction, because we are talking now the 9th World Forum for Democracy. And I would very briefly visualize, that the climate change has very strong effects, especially as we can see here in the northern hemisphere. We are observing fires in regions like in Greenland or in northern Siberia, like in Yakutia, where over the last decades we did not see fire activities like this. But the northern latitudes are not alone, as we are looking from space to South America, to the savanna, to the rainforest and grassland ecosystems. This, however, is not a new phenomenon in many tropical and subtropical regions, as we can see from satellite imagery in 2007, imagery which includes not only the visible fire and smoke, but also the smoke emissions that are traveling from the continent. And if we are even going back to the 1980s, this has been an issue that has been addressed by the media since long time. However, it was almost forgotten by the public and the politics for many years. Back to Europe. In our contemporary landscapes, we are facing changes of fire regimes. And this is due to climate change, but also very important due to land use change, which is associated with rural exodus and the abandonment of rural space. Let me just give you one example. It's more than 70 years ago in Spain, a very typical landscape which was intensively cultivated and which, as a consequence of land use change, turned into an either forested or afforested environment, or an environment where many plants encroached. As you can see here also on the Western Balkan regions, where traditional farming and traditional grazing systems have been abandoned, and now forestries are encroaching, wonderful forests, but fueling fires, and even whole villages are being abandoned, where formerly people had been living, bush and forest is taking over. And if a fire occurs in these landscapes because they are not cultivated anymore, we can see that the former orchards, the fields are burned and damaged very intensively. And it's not only the nature which is affected by fire, it's also the people living there. So there are still people on the countryside in the Euro-Mediterranean countries and Southeast European countries. But while agriculture and pastoralism has been abandoned, we find more visitors, tourists, recreation-seeking people. And even the fires are more and more approaching residential areas, peri-urban areas, as happened in Mati in Greece. And you may remember that 3 years ago, a very destructive wildfire hit the urban fringes of Athens. And within minutes, and we are talking really within a few hours, not only 102 people lost their life, but more than 2,500 structures were lost. And this is why the Secretariat of the European Mediterranean Agreement on Natural Hazards Agreement, which is sponsoring the work of the specialized centers, among which we are serving as a thematic center. We concentrated on looking first on the vulnerability, but also the participation of local communities, how to better defend their assets, their homes, their fields, and their lives against fire. And we started first to develop guidelines for local communities, rural populations, and municipality leaders in the Balkan region. You see here the typical illustrations of the guidelines, in which advice is given how to behave safely to protect homes, families, evacuate elderly people. And then successively, these guidelines were further developed and have now reached different continents. And here you see example illustrations from the Mongolian version, a different environmental and cultural context. And as you see, the Ukrainian version also shows the people, the type and style of houses and the living style, so that people will better understand these guidelines in order to do what? To be prepared for extreme events, to be prepared for fires, and not solely depending on the public services. And it requires, as we have been promoting it in other parts of the world, like in Africa or in Southeast Asia, also the promotion of population groups, including gender-sensitive approaches. And all of this is operating under the concept of integrated fire management, which has a dual meaning: integration of people, empowerment of local communities, but also integration of the wise and beneficial use of fire in land management, because we cannot switch off or leave completely fire out of our landscape. So with the help of the Secretariat of the Euro-Mediterranean Hazards Agreement, we have been first addressing national fire management policies, but at the same time in all countries exercising and studying the bottom-up approach. What are the needs, the necessities that farmers and rural people have, in order to appropriately deal with fire? So this approach in the countries of the Council of Europe member states, and you have mentioned 47 member states. In each member state, we have different problems and different experiences, and these needed to be tested. And by the way, this is supported by a network of regional fire management resource centers. The first had been sponsored and created with the help of funding of the Council of Europe, especially in Southeast Europe and Eastern Europe. But now different multilateral organizations have been stepping in other regions of the world, and where we are also promoting the use of competency standards for training of firefighters, local firefighters, volunteers, and so on. And then, of course, our activities include the general activities of the network of the Euro-Mediterranean specialized centers. In the next contribution, you will hear the message from Demetrios Christou about BeSafeNet, and we are part of that system in order to bring information to civil society. And last year at the International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction, which is a day under the umbrella of the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, we work together with the Europa Secretariat in this regard. And one of the important topics for the coming time is to deal with this problem with the migrants and refugees. This will be a topic in next week's forum. Finally, this is my last slide. Thanks for you being so patient. We think that our work contributes to a new paradigm of thinking that we have not only rights, but we do have responsibilities as civil society. And with this taking responsibility, we think that this is a strength of our democratic system, which should further co-evolve with the increasing environmental challenges and the threats to human health and security. And with this message, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed, Johan, for some very useful information, very dramatic pictures that you've showed us. Thank you. As you said, our next speaker is Dimitris Christou. You are the director of Be Safe Net, which is the European Centre for Disaster Awareness. You're graduates of Aristotle University Thessaloniki with a degree in civil engineering. You've been working in the private sector since 2005. And from 2009, you are serving in the Ministry of Interior of Cyprus in various positions. Your computer and management skills support you in your role as director of Be Safe Net. Yeah, I think you're going to tell us more about that initiative, whose aim is to better protect people, especially young people, from the hazards through an improved information process on the nature, causes, and consequences of natural and technological hazards. So I'll hand over to you in your 12 minutes. If you could tell us a little bit more about Be Safe Net, Dimitris.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for the invitation. I'm being here, as you said, to present you Be Safe Net. Let me share my screen for a second. Can you see my screen?
Perfect.
Great. So, I'm here to present you European Centre for Disaster Awareness, Be Safe Net. Be Safe Net is actually a tool for promoting risk culture among populations. It is dedicated to young people, as you said, using scientific information in a way they can easily understand. This project also receives support from the European and Mediterranean Major Hazards Agreement of the Council of Europe. And natural and technological disasters, our main task, can cause great human economic losses. We cannot prevent many of them, but there is a way to minimize the risk of a disaster by sharing internationally valid and reliable information on the nature, causes, consequences of the natural and technological disasters. The aim of Be Safe Net is to become an educational tool in the hands of the teachers, focusing on risk prevention, preparedness, immediate reaction, and rehabilitation. And our goals are to promote the culture of safety among the new generation of people, among young people, to replace the fear of fear with the culture of preparedness, to disseminate this knowledge to many languages, and to establish the website as an interactive tool between the young people. As Johan said, we're collaborating with almost all of the rest of the European centers under the umbrella of Europa Major Hazards Agreement, and we're trying to merge all this work into one website in order to raise the awareness for these young people. We are dealing with natural hazards and technological hazards. Natural hazards are divided to geological hazards that we have in our website: volcanic eruptions, earthquake, tsunami, landslides, landscape fires we added last year, and hydrometeorological hazards. We have floods, we updated this year, drafted desertification, avalanches, hurricanes, storm surges, and sea level rise. And this year we've prepared and we have ready pandemics to be published soon. And on the other hand, technological hazards, that we have chemical and radiological emergencies, and something we introduced this year as well is related hazard that we just now we have dam failures, but we will also add effects of cultural heritage, of disasters in cultural heritage. And this is just a few screenshots from our website. In the first page, you can see just a briefing about Be Safe Net and what is it about. Going deeper, you can see more details on natural and technological hazards with each icon, of the hazard, the dedicated hazards, that if you click on it, you can see 12 questions, predefined questions for almost every hazard that covers all the topic and describes the hazards and gives guidelines and more information to people, especially to young people. We also introduced some knowledge tests that can help the kids or anyone who like to answer some multiple choice questions and see his knowledge skills there. And we already have a comprehensive and a nice gallery, my favorite part actually. You can see and download. The kids can download a lot of pictures there to use in their schools and to their exercises for all the disasters we described before. And now Olympiad competition. What is Olympiad competition? Actually, BeSafeNet was there for many years. Unfortunately, we were trying to reach children with no success. We thought of many ideas, but the one that really attracted them was the Olympiad competition. Raising awareness and promoting a culture of safety among a new generation of people is one of our main goals. For that purpose, Olympiad was introduced as an online competition back in 2019. It is organized to launch the BeSafeNet as an interactive tool as an online competition between schools on the theme Better Knowledge Against Disasters. It is open to secondary schools into 25 member states of the agreement. The age limit to participate is 16 years and under. The competition gives students a chance to increase their knowledge on natural and technological hazards that they could face even outside of their schools. The students are learning to behave in these situations and how to reduce or prevent as much as possible of the potential impact of disasters. In the last 2 years, almost 2,000 students and almost 400 teams from 12 different countries competed together in the Olympiad competition. This year, even pandemics, Olympiad competition is going to run normally on the 19th of February, tomorrow actually, adjusted to a new way of life. We were thinking either to cancel it for this year, but the last minute we decided to launch it and run it normally. We advised the teachers that because of the lockdown in many countries, they were wondering how we can collaborate, how the students can collaborate together and be a part of the Olympiad this year. Many teams wanted to cancel it, but after a lot of thoughts, we decided to use free tools to video conference between them, to share their screen, to open their microphones and collaborate together in a new Olympiad tomorrow at 9 o'clock GMT. Something else, it's good to note that we have more than 250 different essays on natural and technological hazard, expressing the students' point of view that were submitted during the competition and are now available online. Everybody can go there and download them and see the unique opinion of children on how they see those natural disasters and technological disasters. You can see here some pictures of the kids taking part in Olympiad last year. Apart from the knowledge they gain, you can see the bonding, and you can see smiley faces, having fun and learning also at the same time. They created banners, they send them to us, they are very happy and they are gaining a lot of things from this competition. This is our banner and our poster we introduced this year. We shared it among the schools that are participating in order to disseminate the competition and give the chance to the kids to take part in. And we also created a leaflet. As you can see the graphics dedicated to young people, again with slogans and icons and graphics dedicated to them. Many sources of information on hazard description and emergency measures, especially in most widespread languages, exist nowadays on the internet. However, by surfing through the website, you will have access to common material, useful information, and data available in a variety of languages, such as case studies, lessons learned, school curriculum, and photos and videos. The initiative wishes to go beyond the simple electronic textbook, using games, cartoons, animation, groups of discussions, etc. We hope to provide a friendly and interactive environment in order to interest and introduce young people to hazards and risk prevention awareness and actions such as catastrophic events. It will thus be a powerful tool offering an exchange of information and communication within countries that share similar vulnerability to disasters. In addition, school children and generally young people will find common ground, exchange views and ideas in their own languages, and get support either from each other or from experts. You can find us in our website. You can find us on Facebook and also on European and Mediterranean Major Hazards Agreement website. Thank you, everybody. That was my presentation.
Thank you very much indeed, Dimitris. It's nice to see young people having fun, because as a teacher myself, I know that people learn most when they're bonding and having fun. Thank you for that explanation of your initiative. Let's move now on to Ferruccio Ferrini from the Centro Universitario Europeo per i Beni Culturali in Italy. Buongiorno, Ferruccio. Thank you for being with us today. You're an expert on the protection of historical build-up in seismic-prone areas by recovering the local seismic culture, an original concept and a new approach that you defined, I think, in 1987, which is now accepted worldwide. You're a lecturer, an organizer and coordinator of international congress, seminars and workshops all over the world. I have a list here: Algeria, Colombia, France, Greece, India, Italy, Estonia, Portugal, Spain, Turkey and Venezuela. You collaborate with governments and international agencies to organize research and training activities on the protection of cultural heritage and on disaster prevention. So I think you're going to present to us Loxand. So over to you, Ferruccio. 12 minuti, please.
Oh, thank you. Do you see my PowerPoint?
Not yet. No, we see you, which is very nice with your fantastic moustache, but we can't see the presentation yet.
Yes. I don't know, because I prefer to speak in French language. But
Alors,
can I speak in French?
Yes, I think that's okay. Donc, nous allons parler en français. I'm afraid we don't have any translation, but I'm sure most of our listeners can understand at least the general sense. Donc, à vous, vous pouvez vous exprimer dans la langue de Molière sans problème.
Ah, merci. Donc, le programme qu'on est en train de réaliser dans la corniche d'Europe, c'est finaliser à utiliser les connaissances que les communautés locales ont des risques locaux pour réduire l'impact de ces risques, pour réduire l'impact des désastres naturels. C'est-à-dire, et tout ça, on va le faire au travers d'une initiative dans les écoles secondaires. Quel a été, disons, le background sur lequel ce projet se base? Le background, c'est que les dangers mineurs, c'est-à-dire des branches qui obstruent des rivières, des pentes stables, etc., sont très bien connus par la communauté locale, mais presque jamais ils touchent les décideurs ou bien ils touchent les médias, ce qui est quelque chose de très, très important. Parce que ces risques mineurs, ces dangers mineurs, n'étant pas d'intérêt médiatique, ne stimule pas les décideurs à intervenir. Et donc, on repère, on reconnaît ses connaissances locales juste après le désastre. Parce que là, les correspondants des médias se précipitent pour interviewer des gens et qui disent presque toujours oui, on avait signalé, on avait déjà prévu, là, il y a eu un glissement de terre qui s'était déjà réalisé plusieurs fois, etc. Donc, à partir de là, on a essayé de faire des interventions, des projets qui ont visé deux buts. Le premier, réalisé dans les années 2018-2019, qui a permis de réaliser des TTT pages ou PAT pages, c'est-à-dire des pages tutelle de ton territoire, c'était le titre, dans lesquels c'était des websites qui pouvaient être utilisés par les gens pour signaler des situations de danger. Et ça, c'était juste le premier pas parce que les signalations faites par les citoyennes étaient tournées vers l'institution qui était concernée par intervenir et ensuite on donnait aux gens qui avaient signalé une réponse pour dire qu'est-ce que s'était passé après la signalation. Suite à ce projet, on a mis en route le deuxième projet qui est l'Oxand, qui vise à diffuser l'utilisation des TT pages par une action qui vise à atteindre les familles par le biais des écoles secondaires. Parce que dans d'autres projets que le centre de Ravel a réalisé, il y a eu un constat. C'est-à-dire que les écoles étaient un véhicule très, très performant pour faire passer des messages à l'intérieur des familles. Donc, le projet qu'on est en train de réaliser, c'est ce projet qui vise à l'utilisation des pages de signalation au travers d'une action dans les écoles. Les activités menées en 2020 ont été des meetings de départ, 2 séances de training avec l'Arménie et l'Algérie, des recherches menées sur 3 thèmes, les règles que sont évidente dans l'adaptation du territoire aux besoins des communautés locales et une autre recherche sur les risques cachés qui sont bien sûr les plus dangereux et la troisième recherche sur la mémoire des risques qui est restée dans les communautés locales. Ensuite, on a partagé ces recherches avec toutes les associations locales qui étaient impliquées dans la gestion du territoire et dans la prévention des désastres naturels. Et on a encore plus focalisé la recherche sur les risques qui menacent les chemins de trekking de la côte d'Amalfi. Enfin, grâce à l'apport du centre de Slovaquie, on a pu avoir une première ébauche d'organisation pour faire une évaluation préalable de le bien fondé des signalations que les gens transmettent à la page TTT. Voilà la première le document qu'on a présenté à la première séance, l'autre avec l'Algérie. Et tout ça était, je vous donne juste un abstract, un résumé de la démarche qu'il faut faire pour monter ces TTT pages. Il y a une phase préliminaire dans laquelle on fait des contacts préliminaires, on identifie les acteurs à contacter. Ensuite, il y a une phase d'acquisition des données sur les désastres locaux et sur les connaissances en avait la communauté locale. Ensuite, il y a eu la phase des analyses des données acquises et de leur transfert dans une base de données. Ce qui nous a permis de voir lesquels dangers étaient les plus fréquents dans la zone qui était analysée. Et ça, ensuite, on nous a passé à contacter les médias pour qu'ils puissent héberger des pages dans lesquelles ils pouvaient publier les signalations faites par les citoyens. On a rédigé une fiche à utiliser pour faire la signalation et ensuite on a présenté les pit pages. Le PIT, c'est l'acronyme anglais Protect Your Territory, Protect Your Territory, et donc a fait une présentation publique des pit pages de l'affiche, tout le processus et on a envisagé de mettre en route. Le problème, vrai problème de cette initiative, c'est pas de recevoir les signalations, sinon d'avoir un suivi de ces signalations, parce que ça permet, parce que sans suivi, les gens se découragent et donc tout ça, toute l'organisation des pages risque de faire faillite, de s'écraser. Donc, nous avons aussi présenté quel pouvait être le suivi de chaque signalation en impliquant aussi bien les institutions concernées que les médias qui avaient été impliqués. Voilà les exemples de recherche qu'on a menés sur les règles du territoire, sur les risques évidents et les risques cachés, la mémoire du risque. Et ça, c'est le projet préliminaire pour une team d'évaluation des alarmes et donc pour éviter que des alarmes mal fondées ou pas du tout bien fondées puissent être véhiculées et diffusées. Voilà où on en est pour l'instant. Ça, c'est, je vous montre des slides très très récents. Ça, c'est un média local qui fait mention de la page TTT et que par rapport à un glissement de terre qui s'est réalisé en Côte d'Amalfi, encore un autre média local qui signale un problème sur le chemin des citrons dans la zone d'Amalfi. Donc, quel est, disons, quel est le bilan de ces initiatives? Le bilan, c'est que la page, elle est active. Elle est en train de recevoir des signalations. Le vrai problème, comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, c'est de donner un suivi à ces signalations. Parce que, en général, surtout en Italie, mais je suppose même dans les autres pays, il y a un partage des compétences qui fait que souvent, pour intervenir, il faut impliquer plusieurs institutions. Ça, c'est, disons, la raison technique. La véritable raison du manque ou bien de la réalité des interventions, c'est que, s'agissant de désastres et de dangers mineurs, c'est-à-dire qui ne produisent ou peuvent produire des dégâts réduits, ils ne profitent pas de l'attention des médias. Ne profitant pas de l'attention des médias, les décideurs politiques n'ont pas l'intérêt à intervenir. Donc, on est tout au début, on a cette année 2021 pour compléter l'action. nous espérons que à la fin de cette année, nous pouvons avoir un renforcement de l'utilisation des connaissances que les communautés locales ont des risques locaux pour stimuler les décideurs à aborder une véritable politique d'entretien permanent et intelligente du territoire.
Merci beaucoup, Ferruccio. Merci de ces initiatives. As you say, the question of getting the media interest is obviously an essential one. Voilà. I'd like to bring back other English speakers just for a short discussion. We've only got 5 minutes at the end, but obviously the major question in all this is after your presentations of the risks that we're all more and more aware of, who should be replying to these risks? Is it international organizations? Is it governments? To what extent are government policies effective? Because this is all long-term stuff. It's the usual question about the problems to do with the climate. But is it local initiatives, government initiatives, or international groups? Would anybody like to take that on? Anton, would you like to give a brief answer? We've only got 5 minutes, but what would be your answer to that?
Yeah, this is the problem I illustrated was normally at the local level. So it is very important because the knowledge of local communities concerns the local hazards.
Okay, so, Anton, I'd like to hear Anton about that. Anton Mikalev, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, certainly, Alex. I like to think in terms of rights and responsibilities, and especially of rights of future generations, because very few people tend to think about these rights of future generations and the role they will play in future decision making and in long-term sustainable development, and also the power that exists in the public allocating or attributing a high priority to climate change. And I'll give an example and I'll finish with this. Just consider the extremely high level of prioritization that the public in many countries have attributed to the issue of migration, rightly or wrongly. And look at the enormous influence they have had on decision making. Governments have had to listen. And if we could somehow instill the same level of prioritization of the general public to climate change issues, this will help governments take decisions in the right direction. Because governments have...
Let me ask you a question. Why were people engaged on the migration issue? Why were they engaged? You're suggesting they're not engaged on environmental issues. Why?
Well, they felt it was affecting them personally, I think. And I don't think that the public consider sufficiently that climate change influences them personally.
Okay.
And you know, there's been massive changes. Governments have limited resources. They have many things to do. So at the end of the day, the public can help them take the right decisions in the right direction. Okay. I would suggest.
I think we have a dog. Anyway.
Be interrupted by my dog here.
Oh, your dog is obviously very concerned by climate issues, and that's only a good thing. Johan, would you like to, to what extent is it local, international, or national levels? Johan.
Alex, it is all. I think we agree we cannot act alone, but main emphasis indeed, and this refers especially to wildfire disaster risk reduction, is with local communities. And that means in the end, it is emphasis is on prevention, create resilient landscapes. You know, we are undergoing so dramatic changes through climate change, and climate extremes like droughts and floods and extreme winds. You know, this is will be affecting more and more our landscapes So we have to look at structuring and building our landscapes that can deal with these challenges. And this can be done only by local communities, by local people. However, they need to be supported very clearly. They need to be guided and also financed, if necessary, by the general public or by the state administrations. But this is the way we foresee it. Yeah, thank you.
Dimitris, would you like to comment on that, on the responsibilities of local, of governments? And also, you were showing us young people. Surely they're going to motivate governments much more in the future, because the young of today in 10 years' time are going to be the government of tomorrow. It's a generation that is much more impacted by the issues we've been talking about. Dimitris?
Exactly, Alex. Despite I believe that is a combination of those three levels, focusing on the young children and the young generation, it's a key, I believe, to raise the awareness, to give them the education they need from the youngest stages of their lives, in order to, as you said, in 10 years, to be the politicians, the government themselves, and having that basic knowledge and of disasters and climate change, to be able to focus on these matters and be able to reduce the impact of this climate change in our lives.
Ferruccio, you wanted to, vous vouliez ajouter quelque chose? Allez-y.
Yes. Because I think the local dimension is very, very important to mitigate the impact of disaster produced by the climate change. Because when the extreme events was not frequent, if there was some fragile parts of the territory, there was not important. But today, the flash floods, landslides are much more frequent. So all the lack of maintenance of the territory can produce very, very high impact. So in this sense, I think the involvement of local community in identifying and in stimulating the decision makers to intervene is very important in mitigation of the extreme events impact.
Okay, well, I'm afraid that we've come to the end of our time. Obviously, we only had an hour, but thank you so much for your presentations, all of you, with some very valuable information from all around Europe. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Grazie. Vielen Dank. Thank you for you who've been watching our debate, where we've touched on some of the most important issues. Before we part, I would like to bring your attention to the forum talk that will address the second focus of this month, which is climate migration. This will take place on Tuesday, next Tuesday, the 23rd of February, at the same time, between 16:30 and 17:30, that's Central European time. We will have a discussion with experts on climate migration. They will be from academia, law and international organizations, and they will be more gender mixed. As I say, if you've joined us, we did try and have a few more women taking part, but unfortunately none of them were available. But they will be on Tuesday, we promise. So the campaign, 12 months to answer one question, continues. In March, we will be talking about the topics connected with climate change and inequalities. Anyway, thank you all very much. Thank you once again to our contributors, to the organizers, and above all, thank you very much for your concern and for watching us. Goodbye. Au revoir.
Bye.
Bye-bye.